Wrenches, Regrets, and Reality Checks. Wrench Wars Book 3. Written by L.A. Witt. Narrated by Nick J. Russo. Chapter 1. How the guys in this garage functioned with the swarm of cameras and crew hovering around, Wes would never know. Then again, after 4.5 seasons of Wrench Wars, he supposed they were used to it. Wes didn't like being in front of a camera. Thank God he was just a producer, so he hung back and watched from the sidelines. Fortunately for him, there was a section of the shop that was off limits to the cameras. It was separated from that portion of the garage by a wall, and the windows had long since been tinted to prevent the cameras from catching anything on this side. Wes watched through the darkened glass, waiting for Reggie, the shop's owner, to take a break. "You're gonna be waiting a while." Casey, one of the mechanics who never went over to the other side, to the red zone as they called it, stopped beside Wes and gestured at the window with a wrench. "They've got a good 6-8 hours of work left on that thing." Wes glanced at his watch, then at Casey. "It's almost 5 o'clock. "Yeah." Casey nodded toward the window. "And they've got a good 6 or 8 hours of work left on that thing." He chuckled. "You might want to come by tomorrow." Wes pursed his lips. "They still take breaks, though, don't they?" Casey responded with a snort of derision and shook his head. Without a word, he walked away. Wes faced the window again. He didn't have to ask about Casey's reaction. The shop's collective contempt toward the network, especially the producers, was well known. And given the tight deadlines the men worked under in order to maintain the realistic tension and suspense on the show, he shouldn't have been surprised that state-mandated breaks weren't exactly enforced. Thanks to the tinted glass and the task he was currently focused on, Reggie couldn't know that Wes was watching him. Even if he felt like he was being watched, he'd probably blame it on the camera that was just inches away from his head. Wes, however, was acutely aware of Reggie's presence. In spite of the glass and the wall, he felt him as if the man were standing right there in his face, instead of arguing with Ray or whatever his name was about something relating to a muscle car's undercarriage. His presence hummed on the ends of Wes's nerves just like it always did. They'd only met a handful of times, when the network had pitched the show, during a few visits to assure the network things were going swimmingly, a couple of meetings via Skype, and Wes was still as off balance as he'd been the first time, when the tattooed, stubbled mechanic had caught him completely off guard. He'd expected a grizzled old dude like the ones who ran the other shops that had auditioned for the show, but Reggie had been the polar opposite. He wasn't more than a year or two older than Wes himself, but had that weathered edge of a man who'd spent his life doing manual labor. That edge that fucked with Wes's ability to form a coherent thought. He wasn't stupid either. Not that those who went to work without neckties were stupid, but Wes had to admit his outlook on the blue-collar sector had needed an adjustment or three after stepping into this world. Particularly after meeting Reggie. The mechanics at the other shop were intelligent, but Reggie had a way about him that kept Wes from thinking straight. Like he looked right into him and knew every last thing about him without Wes so much as opening his mouth and revealing a detail. Wes wasn't the only one who'd had to change the way he looked at the men in this shop. The network had been convinced Reggie and his boys would be ignorant and trusting, the kind of people who were easy to manipulate into letting the producers pull strings and run the show to their specifications in the name of ratings. They should have learned after it blew up in their faces during the first season that these guys wouldn't put up with blackmail, manipulation, or coercion. Reggie was no man's puppet. Neither were his boys. But the network knew that now, which was why Wes was here. No one else wanted to broach the subject of the spin-off with Reggie, because they all knew damn well what the answer would be. Sending in the one man who really struggled to push Reggie was pretty much a guarantee of this playing out the way the higher-ups hoped it would. Wes was used to being a pawn in the network's games. This time, they were asking too much. Way too much. But with his job and future employability on the line, he had no choice except to do as he was told and move.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?